The moment bushfires tore through towns and destroyed homes in Tasmania. The search goes on for victims as the PM promises help. Shane Warne fined and suspended after a Big Bash bust-up. Also, an accused killer bailed over a deadly brawl at Rye. And the student pilot who kept his cool.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7 News with Jennifer Keyte.
Good evening. Bushfire emergencies continue to unfold along the east coast of Australia tonight as Tasmania continues to absorb the enormity of what's happened there. The danger in New South Wales is about to escalate dramatically. Victoria's not out of danger either, with residents in the far southwest of the state ordered to get out of the path of a large blaze that's threatening homes and lives. In New South Wales, residents of the town of Owra near Wagga have been ordered to shelter from a fast-moving grass fire as that state prepares for the worst day of bushfires in its history. And the emergency in Tasmania continues, with blazes around Fawcett still causing problems. We begin our coverage tonight at Carlton River, east of Hobart, where Nick Etchells joins us. Nick, what's the situation there?
Well, Jen, there were fears a number of dead could be as high as 100, with so many people reported missing. Tonight, many of them have been accounted for, but not everyone yet. It's incredible that so many people have made it out alive. Now, 7 News has obtained extraordinary pictures of the bushfire here in southern Tasmania, recorded by a volunteer firefighter as his brother's home burned down. Here's Michael Scanlon.
Aaron Miller is the desperate voice behind the camera.
The time's 8 o'clock PM. Real bad day. Real bad day.
These are the terrifying moments flames tore through his tiny hometown of Murdunna Friday evening.
Looks like Julie's is going. There's a massive pile of wood down the back there from wood cutting, and that's all alight. The house just here, completely burnt to the ground.
He watched the fire burn his father's shed.
Well, man, this is the last you'll see of your shed. She's caving in at the back there. Strangely enough, the wood pile hasn't bloody taken out the sheds.
And then his brother Luke's home he helped build. Exhausted from battling the fire front for 2 days, all he could do was watch. He was overcome by emotion.
I'm really sorry, Luke, but I couldn't get down the hill to it, mate. There was fire going everywhere, and I just couldn't get down the road. I'm really sorry, Cobber. I'm really, really sorry.
Eventually, help arrived.
These pack of legends.
But by that point, the fire had left its blackened mark on Murdunna. This is Murdunna now. Many parts of the town are still smouldering. Home after home has been wiped out. Many residents are still in evacuation centres and haven't been in here to assess the damage. The Miller family is one of the few remaining. While Luke's home was destroyed, his brothers, sisters and parents' homes were spared.
There was a number of residences along here that they managed to save. There was one a couple of doors down that was already alight on a twin-storey building with 2 decks on it. And they managed to save both those decks off and extinguish that.
It's confronting walking around so much devastation in a place they grew up, but still the Miller brothers are positive.
We're a fairly tight family and we all chipped in to build this house.
Aaron has been fighting fires for 11 years. He says what he witnessed on Friday was surreal.
It was more about the fact that I couldn't actually do anything about it that made me feel so helpless about the whole thing.
He has high praise for the crews who came in and relieved him. Without them, he believes there would be little left of Murdunna.
Certainly my parents' place would have been lost, there's no doubt about that, and other houses along the road, so, you know, that support's invaluable.
In Murdunna, Michael
Scanlon joins us now from Murdunna. Michael, what are the Millers' plans? Are they going to rebuild?
Nick, they will. This will always be home for them. Thankfully, Luke, the resident who did lose his home, was insured. He's now waiting for assessors to come through and check his property. Now, they were given plenty of warning when the fire was coming through here, and his wife was able to save some of their more valuable possessions, including a hard drive full of photos. Nick, they are an incredibly resilient family.
The Prime Minister today met with emergency chiefs and fire victims. Julie Gillard also toured the worst affected community of Denali, where she was shocked by the level of destruction. Paul Kadak has more.
In what could be ground zero for the Tasmanian fires, the Prime Minister tours Denali, where about 65 properties were lost. This was Denali Primary School, a centre for excellence, reduced to twisted steel and rubble.
What is the message to this community from the rest of the nation?
Oh, the very fact I'm here is to send a message that the rest of the nation has got its eyes on Tasmania, and the rest of the nation is thinking about the losses here and will be supporting Tasmanians through.
The Prime Minister met one of them, 9-year-old Billy. She's been taking this hard, but today a chance to pose for photos and even getting a rare prime ministerial autograph.
This school was the heart of this community, and locals want assurances that it will be rebuilt, fearing that if it isn't, it will be an even more bitter blow to Denali. At the local pub, a donation box was prominently displayed on the bar, but Ms Gillard wasn't committing other than to promise emergency handouts of up to $1,000 each, plus military assistance if needed. No fire deaths have been confirmed.
This is a devastating scene that we're seeing here, but the worst thing is if human lives are lost.
Police say a lot of people are still out of touch.
We can't say for certain that there hasn't been a human life or more than one human life lost as a result of these fires.
He says it could be several days before everyone's accounted for. Police have been inundated with inquiries, not just locals but from interstate and overseas. One problem, a lack of access to the Tasman Peninsula.
And we got to Fawcett and we were stopped at Fawcett and the police turned us around, said, well, you can't go home. The roads are all blocked.
They wanted to go in. These people from Summers Bay had to get out.
He just screamed, we've got to get out. The flames were coming, like the roar of it was terrible.
They lost a shed, but their house is safe. They think.
We're all here, that's the main thing. I suppose we didn't lose any lives that day.
A feeling echoed at a refuge centre in Sorell.
Just glad we're out, that's all. Just glad we're all out and safe and sound.
Many there still in shock at losing their homes and possessions.
Words can't really describe it, you know, just so long as we made sure that the rest of the family was safe.
Today the Arthur Highway was reopened, at least to escorted convoys.
If everyone could start lining up behind us.
Some taking in supplies. Jonathan Ricketts was given a generator by a complete stranger.
He just said, take a generator down, someone will need it. I thought that was fantastic.
He'd driven out this morning.
It's not very nice down there.
Not just the loss of homes and livelihoods, but the number of injured animals.
A lot of sheep that are still burned and will need to be put down.
We estimate probably out of over 6,000 down there, we probably, you know, we might have lost between 1,000 and 2,000.
But everyone's eager to help, even these school kids sending cakes.
And we've been making cupcakes and we thought we might bring them down to share.
In Denali, Paul Kadak, 7 News.
Jen, we'll leave it there for the time being, but I'll be back a little later on with more from the Tasmanian bushfires.
OK, thank you very much, Nick. And later in the bulletin, we'll also hear from Victoria's Fire Services Commissioner about the danger we're facing here.
We'll see fires that even have the potential to move fast, more intense and certainly do damage. And I think you only have to reflect on what we've seen in Tasmania in the last couple of days.
And to the rest of the day's news now. The family of a Cranbourne West man who drowned at Listerfield Lake yesterday has told how he perished trying to save his daughter and nephew. 11-year-old Teresa Latu paid tribute to her brave father and asked that her Lord take care of him. Karen O'Sullivan met her.
Calico Leo Latu was better known as Leo, and it was his daughter Teresa and her cousin he died trying to save.
And I fell off the boat, and that's when my father jumped in to come save me. He didn't know the water was deep.
Teresa says all she wanted to do was help her father.
His last few words was to me was, Teresa, bring the boat because he's drowning. I tried my best, but I couldn't reach him.
Both children were rescued, but police searched the lake for 4 hours before recovering Leo's body. Today, the tight-knit Tongan family gathered to support Leo's widow at the Cranbourne West home, wanting to pay tribute to the 34-year-old who loved both rugby and life.
He loves everyone, he treats everyone the same.
1-year-old Peter was Leo's youngest child. Leo's passing is not only a loss to his large family, but also to the entire Tongan Catholic community. The family moved to Australia from New Zealand 4 years ago.
Dad, I love him. Please, Lord, take care of him.
Karen O'Sullivan, 7 News.
Shane Warne's been suspended for 1 match and fined $4,500 over an extraordinary tantrum he threw last night at the MCG. Warne says he's disappointed he lost his cool, but claims the ban's too harsh. More from Nathan Templeton.
Not for the first time in his career, Shane Warne walked out of a Cricket Australia disciplinary hearing to face the media after the Big Bash turned into the Big Brawl.
I'm very conscious of the image of the game, and I'm disappointed in some of my actions last night.
The trouble started when the Melbourne Renegades West Indian import Marlon Samuels grabbed Stars batsman David Hussey as he attempted a run. Later, when Samuels came out to bat, Warne made his displeasure clear.
Come on, what an over from Shane Warne. Grab some people, grab some more people.
And things escalated when Warne fielded a ball and hit Samuels on the arm.
What is going on? It's completely lost out here. The umpires, they're talking about running him out.
Warne claims that was an accident and authorities believed him, but he was found guilty of 3 other charges, including abusing an umpire. His penalty, a 1-match suspension and a fine of $4,500.
I'm pretty disappointed with the severity of the penalties too. I think that was pretty harsh.
Samuels also faces 2 charges, but he was unable to front a hearing today. He's nursing a suspected fractured eye socket from a later incident.
Oh, look, it's up to Cricket Australia to decide, what things are sort of, outside the spirit of the game.
Cricket Australia says its major target audience for the Big Bash is mums and kids. A record 46,000 were here at the MCG last night to witness the altercation, yet still officials today were very reluctant to criticise the actions of their main draw card.
This sort of thing is probably something that only inspires a greater rivalry between the Renegades and the Stars and creates greater interest for the Big Bash League.
Warne will miss tomorrow night's must-win game against the Sydney Thunder at the MCG. Nathan Templeton, 7 News.
A court's been told a teenager charged over a fatal king hit at Rye is claiming self-defence, despite CCTV contradicting his story. The 18-year-old was released on bail after a magistrate declared he had no power to keep him in custody. Kate Osborne reports.
The 18-year-old accused killer was treated with kid gloves. In a perhaps unprecedented move, Dylan Closter's family was allowed to drive into the Melbourne Custody Centre and drive out a back entrance to avoid waiting media. He'd earlier been granted bail on a manslaughter charge arising from an alleged king hit on 22-year-old David Kasai at Rye early last week. It was his second shot at bail, having been refused release late last week. This time his application was unopposed. During the brief hearing, a detective outlined fresh allegations. He claimed Closter had been drinking and was shouting at Mr Kasai's friend when a fight broke out. The accused claims he was assaulted by a number of persons who were with the boy. He effectively and instinctively lashed out and struck that person who fell to the ground.
He indicated to the police during his record of interview that he was in fact kicked and punched when he was on all fours.
But the court was told that account was contradicted by CCTV vision from 2 angles. As well as setting a nighttime curfew, Magistrate Rosenschlag added a special condition that Closter not commit further crimes, saying if he did it would be a breach of bail and he'd be returned to custody, and his father's $50,000 surety would be at risk. Public outrage surrounding the case has led to unwarranted attention for Closter's lawyer, respected solicitor Bernie Balmer.
Some people in the community who are sending me emails and dirty texts and things like that, you just got to understand I'm just doing a job.
Closter's next court appearance is in April. Kate Osborne, 7 News.
A student pilot has pulled off an incredible landing at Mangalore Airport north of Melbourne. The 21-year-old was forced to circle for several hours before landing with just 2 wheels. Linda Kincaid explains.
For a student pilot, this training session was far from routine. 4 fire crews on the ground, a dozen police and paramedics on standby. The 21-year-old took off from Mangalore Airport north of Melbourne at 9 this morning. The Piper Warrior's rear wheel was spotted dangling from the plane. A short time later, it was gone.
This is your touchdown zone.
Guided by air traffic control, the trainee for China's Southern Airlines was given step-by-step instructions in both English and Chinese.
Make sure the aircraft lands in the right foam.
The pilot was forced to circle the airport for more than 4 hours to burn off fuel.
The reason the foam was there was to give the pilot some indication where to actually touch down.
On just 2 wheels, the plane skidded off the runway and came to a sudden stop. Clocking up his 120th hour of training. This was a real-life test, a mid-air emergency that could have been disastrous. Thankfully, this was a textbook landing.
Yeah, he's to be congratulated on that. It was a good effort.
The pilot walked away shaken but unharmed. The plane is one of 34 aircraft owned by Moorabbin Flight Training Academy. No one at the airport would comment. An investigation is underway. Linda Kincaid, 7 News.
And when we return on 7 News, a Scottish tourist convicted over a brutal glassing. Also, the wayward roo that gave police the runaround. And Father Bob's treatment begins. A Scottish tourist who glassed a man sitting outside a St Kilda cafe had been on a 14-hour drinking binge before the attack. Richard Goldie was fined $3,000 and is expected to leave the country within days. Brendan Roberts has the story.
Richard Goldie will return home to Scotland on Thursday. The stonemason's 6-month working trip costing him $3,000 and a criminal record after pleading guilty to intentionally causing serious injury. It emerged today that the 24-year-old had been on a marathon 14-hour drinking session at several Melbourne pubs in the lead-up to the vicious glassing outside the La Roche bar in St Kilda. His excuses for the attack were varied and contradictory. Goldie first told police he had no recollection of the incident, then claimed the victim had teased his friend about being drunk, and finally that he had felt threatened by the victim and launched a preemptive strike.
Did you really feel under threat? Do you think it was the 14 hours of drinking beforehand that may have made you think that?
It was Goldie himself who fared worst in the attack, a cut to his finger requiring 6 stitches, while the victim escaped with minor cuts to his face.
Magistrate Peter Reardon said this was yet another concerning example of drunken city violence involving young men, and had it not been for the victim sustaining minor injuries, Goldie could have faced a jail sentence.
Meanwhile, police are hunting a man over a sickening glassing attack in May last year. Footage shows the offender in the red hoodie grappling with the victim outside a Lygon Street venue before smashing a glass on his face. A nationwide search has been launched for the offender. Brendan Roberts, 7 News.
2 men have fronted court over the death of 14-year-old autistic boy Timothy O'Brien near Ballarat. 35-year-old Darren Wilson and 37-year-old Joel Henderson are each charged with 1 count of murder. Wilson appeared with a large bandage on his head. The court heard he suffered a head injury in the brawl but hasn't been to hospital. Henderson's defence lawyer said he also suffered injuries and is at risk of self-harm. Timothy died after being struck to the head with a blunt object. Both men have been remanded in custody to face court again in late June. A woman's turned up at Sunshine Hospital with gunshot wounds shortly after a police shooting in Maribyrnong. 2 officers were trying to intercept a black Commodore sedan when it was driven straight at them. Fearing for their lives, police opened fire.
The driver of the vehicle has put his foot down and accelerated quite heavily towards the police members.
The car then sped off. Police are investigating whether the 2 incidents are linked. A wayward kangaroo has caused havoc at Melbourne Airport, much to the delight of onlookers. It was the second marsupial to make its way into the Tullamarine car park in just a matter of months. Cameron Bowe has the story.
There's no going back for a kangaroo, as these would-be rescuers learnt the hard way. For over an hour, this young boomer kept a mob of federal police and airport staff on the hop. The at times comical chase was brought to an end by a well-aimed tranquiliser dart.
Judging by his nail wear, he's been hopping around on bitumen for quite a while. Certainly done some damage to his feet. He'd been in a lot of pain, which worked to our benefit. Maybe the only thing that stopped him from panicking enough to try to jump over the railing.
It's the second time in 4 months a kangaroo has been found on the loose within the airport car park. In October, another eastern grey made it all the way to level 5.
But how'd they get it? But how'd they get here all the time, yeah?
I'm just
happy he didn't get hit by a car.
Not everyone was happy to see a marsupial up close.
Those caring for the roo fear he could face more danger on his release. They're concerned there could soon be a cull of roo numbers here around the airport.
Melbourne Airport denies it's made any recent applications to the DSC to conduct a cull. It's hoped the roo will be back on its feet in a week. Cameron Bowe, 7 News.
Former Federal Parliamentary Speaker Peter Slipper will face court over claims he rorted cab charge vouchers. Australian Federal Police have issued a summons over 3 offences of dishonestly causing a risk of a loss to the Commonwealth. Mr Slipper denies abusing taxpayer-funded cab vouchers last year. He's due to appear in the Canberra Magistrates Court on February the 15th. Australian families are enjoying cheaper food prices thanks to the strong Aussie dollar and retail competition. But as Georgina McKerrow reports, we've been warned that it won't last.
Paul Menitzes knows how expensive it is to feed 2 growing, hungry boys.
The cherries have to go in the fridge.
He looks for savings whenever he can.
Every time we go to the shops, the bills are 100 plus.
The latest OECD data shows Aussie families are now enjoying the fastest falling food prices in the developed world. Fruit and veg has dropped 9.9%, lamb 5.7% and poultry 4.3%. Nationally, costs are down 2.7%.
It makes a big difference where you can save some money.
The high dollar has reduced the price of imports.
Of course, the downside of that is it's squeezing margins right through the supply chain, which again impacts on jobs.
Since 2009, fresh produce prices have stabilised after the recovery from damaging floods and cyclones. While the figures show a welcome drop in prices, many consumers still believe the overall cost of living absorbs any small savings that can be made at the checkout.
Utilities and mortgage and home insurance, these sorts of things have been biting.
But experts say we shouldn't get used to the savings.
Cost pressures can only be contained for so long.
Georgina McKerrow, 7 News.
The rare disorder that's left Father Bob Maguire bedridden has weakened his legs but not his community spirit. The much-loved Catholic priest has launched a blood drive from his hospital bed. The 78-year-old today began treatment for a neuromuscular disease that will include regular blood transfusions.
We just take it for granted. I don't know where we think it comes from.
He's now urging others to roll up their sleeves and donate. And after the break, more on Australia's bushfire emergencies. Also, I'll talk to Victoria's Fire Services Commissioner about what's in store here. And we'll cross to Giaan for the latest on the weather. There's a fire emergency underway in the southwest of the state. A large, out-of-control, slow-moving bushfire is heading towards the small community of Drick. Lives and homes are potentially at risk, and residents have been warned to evacuate or enact their fire safety plans. And police have launched an arson investigation after a fire burnt through 50 hectares of grassland and extensively damaged a car wrecking yard at Little River near Geelong. Several properties were under threat from the blaze, which broke out late yesterday afternoon.
I was here on my own and I saw the burning up the road there and it hit the crossing.
It took 130 firefighters more than 2 hours to bring the flames under control. There's also a major emergency looming in New South Wales, which is facing the worst bushfire conditions in its history. Dozens of fires are burning across the state, and in one danger zone, hundreds of residents were ordered to flee as flames roared towards them. Alex Hart is at the township of Owra near Wagga. Alex, what happened?
Well, Jen, a short time ago, the Rural Fire Service downgraded the threat level here to watch and act, but to be ready to move if the situation worsens, which is still possible given that this fire is still burning out of control in some parts. It broke out just before 11 o'clock this morning, then just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, the almost 400 residents of this township were told it was too late to get out of their homes if they hadn't done so already, and to bunker down and find shelter as this fire quickly approached them. But around 140 firefighters and 46 trucks on the ground, as well as 2 fixed-wing aircraft and a helicopter, managed to save the properties. Today, the fire rating has been considered very high. Tomorrow, it will be extreme, and we felt the winds start to pick up again here just recently. So while the threat has been reduced, it certainly hasn't passed, Jen.
Thanks very much, Alex. And that's not the only area that's facing problems, with fire authorities right across New South Wales on high alert, particularly in the southwest. Sean Berry is there.
The fire in Aura is exactly what authorities had feared and dread will happen again tomorrow. A dangerous combination of soaring temperatures, strong winds and lightning storms have them preparing for catastrophic fire danger levels.
We're certainly likely to see that wind speed increase over the next few days, and so that's certainly going to lead to some potential for some very bad conditions.
Malcolm the super crane is on standby for the heatwave's peak tomorrow.
Sometimes we get a bit of luck and things pass without anything happening, but we just have to be prepared for the worst at the moment.
Today, temperatures in the state's west hit 45 degrees. Definitely beach weather, even if the water's a little cold. In Hay, one of the hottest towns in New South Wales, the race was on to the local pool. The kids weren't worried by the plus 40 conditions.
I think it'd be pretty horrible if you're an old person, but if you're nice and young, like these guys, yeah, it's all right, isn't it, guys? Yes, it is.
Around here, a record-breaking heat wave isn't worth getting excited about.
Country people are a lot more tolerant than the city people too. I mean, we have to make do with a lot of things and improvise.
They've learnt to stay out of the heat too. At lunchtime, Hay was like a ghost town.
It's fine, people take precautions and keep out of the midday sun without too much water.
He knows his town.
Cheers!
Sometimes you've got to look at the positives.
You complain but nobody listens, mate, you know.
Who could blame a bunch of shearers for enjoying a thirst-quenching ale? Sean Berry, 7 News.
Victorians have been reminded that the state's facing an extremely dangerous 5 weeks. 4 days out of every 7 will be deemed either a severe or extreme fire risk, with many parts of the state still baking in extreme heat. Earlier, I spoke to Fire Services Commissioner Craig Lapsley about what we can expect. Craig Lapsley, thanks for joining us. Victoria continues to dry out with no good soaking rain in sight for January or February. How worried are you about the potential for serious bushfires?
We're into a very serious bushfire season this year. We've had a wet winter, but it's been dry since October, so we've had a very dry period. We've got plenty of grass, a lot of grass, very dry. It's now 100% dry, but the bushlands have also dried out. So it's not just about grasslands, it's about grass and bush. An example of that is that we've got a 4,000 hectare fire that's burning in the southwest at the moment. It's been burning now for 2.5 days. It will continue to burn tomorrow, which is a critical fire weather day. And people in the southwest, between Portland and Nelson, will be very clear about it. It's putting up a lot of smoke. And we certainly ask those communities to be very vigilant about the fire that's down in southwestern Victoria.
And how long will this threat exist? Are we talking weeks or months? And which particular areas of the state are you most worried about?
Look, the best we can see is that it continues on definitely for all of January and into February. There is no forecast rain at all, so there's no break. It's interesting, on Wednesday we get it's a slightly cooler day, a lot milder in Victoria on Wednesday, but we go straight back into it Thursday, Friday, and we've got another serious fire day running on Friday. So it's into a 4-day cycle where we're seeing severe days come and go every 4 days. That's the weather that we'll experience all the way through January and into February, so it's not going to go. The critical areas in Victoria is definitely north of the Divide, but we shouldn't underestimate when we get the weather in around Melbourne, it's as serious there. Tomorrow though, Tuesday, is definitely north of the Great Divide, along the Murray River and all of those associated towns in that area.
How do the conditions compare to what we saw leading up to the destructive Black Saturday fires?
They're quite different. The Black Saturday fires of 2009 had 10 years, 11 years of drought preceding, which means we didn't have a lot of fuel. The difference now, we've got large amounts of grass that is dry. So we've got fuel, dry bushland, so we'll see fires that even have the potential to move fast, more intense, and certainly do damage. And I think you only have to reflect on what we've seen in Tasmania in the last couple of days. You know, that level of destruction is potentially in anywhere in southeastern Australia, and I think we need to be very conscious of where we are and what we do when these weather predicaments come and challenge us.
And Craig, given our commitment of firefighters to help out in Tasmania, do we have enough firefighters to cover Victoria in the event of a significant bushfire event?
We do, we certainly do. We run 8,000 firefighters every day to run out the doors at any fire. We sent 64 of our firefighters across to Tasmania. That was a calculated decision. It's the right thing to do, and it doesn't compromise our capability in Victoria.
OK, we wish you well. Craig Lapsley, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Jennifer.
To Giaan Rooney now, who's in Geelong. And Giaan, a total fire ban's been declared in a number of areas across Victoria tomorrow.
That's right, Jen. It was a warm day today, but don't be fooled by the forecast for Melbourne, which shows some cooler weather on the way. We'd love some of this rain, because in some parts of Victoria it's still very, very hot. A total fire ban has been declared for the Mallee and the Wimmera, along with the Northern Country and North East districts. And this is why towns like Mildura, Swan Hill, Yarrawonga and Wangaratta have been sweltering for days. And it's going to be in the high 30s again tomorrow. And Jen, it's going to heat up even more later in the week in some of those areas, with temperatures returning to the 40s. I'll be back with a full forecast a little bit later on.
OK, thanks, Giaan. And after the break, we'll return to Nick Etchells in Tasmania. Also, the Syrian president mobbed giving a rare speech in Damascus. And Gerard Depardieu's new life in Russia. Syria's embattled President Assad has made a rare public speech, which the US has described as being detached from reality. A frenzied crowd swarmed on their defiant leader in Damascus to hear him call on the nation to fight for Syria's survival during what he calls a state of war.
We are now in a state of war in every sense of the word. We are now confronting a vicious external war.
President Assad also appealed for foreign governments to stop funding the rebels, calling his enemies puppets of the West. French actor Gerard Depardieu now has a Russian passport thanks to a battle over taxes in his home country. Russian President Vladimir Putin personally granted the 64-year-old citizenship. Depardieu quit France to dodge a new 75% tax rate for millionaires, leading to accusations he's a traitor. Russia has a taxation rate of just 13%. And Prince Charles says the impending arrival of his first grandchild has made him more determined to tackle issues such as climate change. In a rare and wide-ranging interview, he also tells of his fears for Harry on the battlefield.
Certainly every night when I get a bit, I worry. But he loves doing what he's doing. He's brilliant at it. I think he's helping to keep the nastiest heads down and protecting our troops on the ground.
A hoax press release has helped wipe more than $300 million off the value of a coal company in which Nathan Tinkler is a major shareholder. The press release claimed that the ANZ Bank had withdrawn funding from a project because of environmental concerns and was sent out by an anti-coal mining activist. Whitehaven recovered after a trading halt to finish 2 cents weaker. The Commonwealth Bank also retreated. Telstra closed 3 cents lower and Suncorp shed 7 cents. Overall, the market closed slightly lower, the All Ordinaries losing almost 5 points. The Australian dollar is buying 104 US. And returning to the Tasmanian bushfire emergency now, and Nick Etchells. Nick, the Prime Minister spent an extraordinary amount of time today with the victims.
She did, Jen. Julie Gillard met with survivors who've lost their homes and told the people of Tasmania the entire nation is standing behind them. More from Amanda Abate.
Julia Gillard arrived in Denali behind a convoy of police and emergency crews through the main street of what was once a picturesque seaside town, but now a ghost town.
The very fact I'm here is to send a message that the rest of the nation has got its eyes on Tasmania.
65 buildings, including a primary school, have been destroyed. Many residents haven't been allowed back and don't know what they'll be confronted with.
And beyond my ability to fathom why one part burns so intensely and then other areas get spared.
When Julie Miller and her family were forced to flee, their home was up in flames.
Loaded up the car with the photos. Basically, 10 minutes later, my son got up on the roof and he just screamed, "We've got to get out." The flames were coming.
We're all here, that's the main thing. I suppose we didn't lose any lives that day, so yeah.
The Prime Minister also met with survivors here at a recovery centre at Sorell, hearing first-hand stories of heroic escape and devastating loss. Craig lost his home, but knows he could have lost so much more.
Words can't really describe it, just so long as we made sure that the rest of the family was safe.
The Prime Minister thanked volunteers and firefighters, men and women who have worked tirelessly because they couldn't imagine doing anything else.
They feel like they're returning a favour. I think they're showing great Australian mateship at what is an incredibly difficult time.
Amanda Abate, 7 News.
Jen, the people down here are just showing amazing resilience. This farm behind me, this was a house in which the farmer lived. He managed to get most of the cattle he was running off and just set them scattering into the neighbourhood, thinking that he may not see them again and they may be scattered far and beyond. But the next day when the fire had cleared, he found them standing back at the fence, wanting to come back in for a feed. And I asked him just before we came on air tonight if he was planning to rebuild, and he said, mate, what else are we going to do? They are very resilient people and they're really keeping their chins up here, and we take our hats off to them. Now, anyone wanting to help out the victims of these fires can do so by making donations to the Red Cross Bushfire Appeal for Tasmania. You can get in touch through the Red Cross website or dial 1800 811 700. Jen, back to you.
Thank you very much, Nick. And Nathan Templeton's along next with sport.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone. Coming up next, why Matthew Wade's happy to have a rest. Also, Sam Stowes are out to turn around her form slump. And an exclusive look at the revamped Melbourne Park. Welcome back. As you saw earlier, Shane Warne has copped a one-match ban and a $4,500 fine for his fiery stoush at the MCG last night. Tomorrow night's opponents, the Sydney Thunder, say they're disappointed they won't get to face off against the Stars captain. Matt Carmichael reports.
Before his last chance to strike for the Thunder, Chris Gale declined a chance to defend his West Indian teammate Marlon Samuels after last night's Big Bash blow-up.
They grab some more people.
Warne says his punishment's too harsh, and Gale agrees.
What about Warney, mate? Do you think he'll be playing tomorrow night? He hopes so.
Mike Hussey had some family time today after celebrating a winning end to his career with Australian teammates last night. They hadn't missed the big news on Warne.
I heard about the Big Bash. I'm not too happy.
Matthew Wade's taking a break for the first two one-dayers, and with the likes of Aaron Finch in the side, he thinks rotation is a win for fans, not a rip-off.
I'm more than happy to rest. They'll probably win the first two games and then we'll come back and they'll want the other blokes back in the team.
Shane Watson has confirmed he'll give up bowling to make it back.
His primary focus right now is to make the team as an out-and-out batsman.
Man of the match in his second test, paceman Jackson Bird hopes he's here to stay and says bring on England in the Ashes.
If I get the call up there, that'd be great, and I'm definitely ready to go. Nice to get man of the match, I suppose, in my home state with all my family and friends there, so yeah, it was definitely a very enjoyable experience.
Matt Carmichael, 7 News.
Sam Stowes' fight to find form before the Australian Open starts tonight in Sydney, where she's currently taking on China's Zheng Ji. The local hope is desperate to find touch after bowing out in the first round in Brisbane. Tom Brown has the highlights.
Stowes is under immense pressure to break her Australian hoodoo just a week from the Open. Head-to-head, the Aussie leads Zheng Ji 3-1. The game on serve a short time ago. Earlier, Matt Ebden was locked in a tense battle with Spaniard Marcel Granollers when he copped a time violation for a slow shirt change.
I understand you, but I didn't make the rule. The rule's like that.
Ebden then needed an injury timeout before losing in 3 sets. Thirsty work for Leighton Hewitt on centre court. Famous for doing the hard yards, the veteran braved this afternoon's heat for almost an hour. In red-hot form, Serena Williams also hit the practice courts, although she took a break for a surprise spectator when Sister Venus arrived from Perth. And while the world's best finalise their preparations, we've been given a sneak peek of the latest facilities they'll use for the first time at this year's Open. Veteran James Blake took us on a tour. He's won 10 career titles and puts the $360 million facility on par with Wimbledon.
This is the field of dreams.
The National Tennis Centre has 50 new practice courts.
Like at the US Open, when it does start raining and people are scrambling for practice courts, it's a nightmare.
Ready 4 months ahead of schedule, it also features a cutting-edge gym and recovery facilities.
We have to use like a garbage can and dump ice in that and do things like that. So this is pretty nice.
There isn't anything that can compare to this.
Tom Brown, 7 News.
Great facilities, and Jen, that Sam Stowes. The match continues on 7-2 and Bernard Tomic tomorrow in Sydney as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nathan. And now we join Giaan Rooney again in Geelong.
Thanks, Jen. It's going to be another hot one tomorrow. I'll be back with the details after the break.
Returning to our top story now, the bushfire crisis in Tasmania, and hundreds of people stranded with their cars at Port Arthur have finally made it to safety. Tinika Everard filed this report a short time ago.
We've been down there since the 29th of December, when we're almost there, which is good.
It is devastating.
They're on their way home, some to discover if they even have one.
It's a long way from being over.
Up to 3,500 people have called Port Arthur their safe haven, bandying together to get by.
It was like we got this big red glow and fireball. It really frightened us.
Marie Thompson is one of thousands of terrified locals, but without the basics, she's forced to call the historic site of Port Arthur home for now.
I mean, you can't live in a house that's got no power and no water.
Now they're being ferried by sea cats from Nabina near the evacuation centre to Hobart. But with electricity cut to surrounding areas, 400 locals will move straight into the evacuation centre tonight until power is restored.
Well, we've got enough food, we've got enough water. I think just people are getting a little bit tired now.
Stephen Large is running the centre.
When do you think you're going to get out?
Hopefully tonight, but it could be tomorrow, it could be the day after, I don't know.
Ben Gatenbeek is a volunteer firefighter from Adelaide on his dream holiday when the fires took hold.
Amongst the locals, it's worse because they're frustrated that they can't live a normal life, but the tourists here are a little bit more relaxed, I find, because we're looked after very well.
The fires have struck in the middle of peak tourist season. 90% of those initially at the evacuation centre were travellers. Now they have dramatic tales to take home.
I come from Germany and we have in Germany no bushfire.
We were staying in a motel, but we ran out of money and we came over here and the people had already left on the ferry, so we took it over.
Volunteers have been the backbone of this operation. 2 bus coaches have been taking the stranded to the boats. Everyone has a role.
The experience is quite nerve-wracking because it's so unknown.
Bus driver Kerry Franklin feared coming across more outbreaks with a load of people in his care. Each passenger has left a mark, especially an old man with his pet dogs.
He had his 2 dogs and all he had was his 2 dogs, and one with a broken leg, and that was fairly emotional for everybody. That's really been the issue, mainly the emotions of people.
Naomi Jeffs left her home White Beach to roll up her sleeves, pitching in as soon as she arrived.
It's been a big adaptation, living without water and without electricity, just those luxuries you take for granted.
It's a family holiday minus the usual entertainment, but a trip they'll never forget.
So what are you doing to keep yourselves busy?
Tinika Everard, 7 News.
Amazing community spirit. And now here's Giaan Rooney with the weather.
Thank you, Jen. I'm actually down here at the LeisureLink Aquatic Centre in Geelong, which is a little bit ironic considering that the whole country is desperate for some rain. This place has plenty of it, and as you can imagine, is very popular with kids of all ages. Let's have a look at the weather today, and it was a mostly sunny day in Melbourne. We reached a maximum of just over 30 degrees at 3:55 this afternoon after an overnight low of 16 around 4 a.m. At the moment, it's 27 degrees. On the satellite, a weak trough of low pressure will linger across eastern Victoria tonight. The next high pressure system will move over Victoria on Thursday, reaching the Tasman Sea by night time. Around the country tomorrow, Perth early storms and a top of 36, a sunny 31 for Adelaide, some relief for Hobart with showers and a top of 25, a hot and partly cloudy 38 in Canberra, an extremely hot 43 forecast for Sydney, and Brisbane expecting an early shower and 32, showers and 33 for Darwin with a late storm. Across Victoria tomorrow, dry, hot and mostly sunny across the north with fresh west to northwesterly winds. Warm and partly cloudy on and south of the ranges with isolated showers and a chance of thunderstorms during the morning, clearing eastwards. The fire danger is very high once again and it's severe in the north of the state. Mostly sunny across the suburbs after a morning shower. We're looking at a top of 29 for Geelong, 26 at Mount Dandenong and the same for Frankston. For Melbourne tomorrow, partly cloudy, isolated showers and the risk of a thunderstorm clearing around midday, then isolated showers redeveloping late afternoon or evening. A top of 31 after an overnight low of 18. For the week ahead, morning showers and a top of 20 on Wednesday, becoming sunny and 28 Thursday, 37 with a possible late shower Friday, a morning shower and 25 Saturday, and a partly cloudy 26 degrees on Sunday. So some warm weather to come, Jen, but looking beautiful for next weekend.